from world leaders to free speech supporters. An outpouring of condemnation for the attack on the satirical French magazine Charlie Hebdo. An affordable weapon in the fight against malaria. And the director of the new Martin Luther King Jr. biopic makes Golden Globes history. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. France is marking a day of mourning for the deaths of at least 12 people in Wednesday's shooting massacre in central Paris, targeting the satirical publication Charlie Hebdo. Flags are flying at half-staff on Thursday, and security has been stepped up around Paris. A manhunt is ongoing for two suspects. Meanwhile, world leaders and free speech supporters from around the world are strongly condemning attacks. Sharon Ben reports.
People took to the streets in France and Spain Wednesday night in a show of support for journalists killed by gunmen in a brutal attack on the French satirical publication Charlie Hebdo earlier in the day. The paper had lampooned the Muslim prophet Mohammed.
C'est un journal qui a une grande liberté de ton, qui a une grande indépendance.
It's a newspaper with a great freedom of tone, with great independence. It's this independence which has been targeted, the freedom of the press, and that's the essence of what journalism is.
The masked gunmen, dressed in black and carrying assault rifles, stormed into the paper's offices as the journalists were holding their morning editorial meeting and opened fire before escaping. Survivors said the gunmen shouted that the Prophet Muhammad had been avenged. World leaders, including British Prime Minister David Cameron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and U.S. President Barack Obama, described the shooting as cowardly and barbaric.
The values that we share with the French people, a belief, a universal belief in freedom of expression, is something that can't be silenced because of the senseless violence of the few.
The publication had come under attack before, when it was firebombed in 2011 for lampooning the Prophet Muhammad. Wednesday's assault was one of the worst terrorist attacks in Europe in recent years. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry described the killings as part of a larger confrontation between civilization and those against freedom and the civilized world.
They may wield weapons, but we in France and in the United States share a commitment to those who wield something that is far more powerful. Not just a pen, but a pen that represents an instrument of freedom, not fear.
Thousands of people took to Facebook and Twitter in support of the publication and in defense of freedom of expression. Muslim leaders in France condemned the shooting as the act of criminals. Sharon Bain, VOA News, Washington.
Well, joining us via Skype from Paris is Ms. Foune Konate, an international relations scholar and advocate for social integration. Ms. Konate, welcome. And start by telling us what was your reaction and perhaps those of your friends.
I was very shocked, and my friends and many people was very, very shocked. And quickly, many people demonstrated in the big cities in France. They manifested their indignation against the crime, the attack.
Now, are there concerns that these attacks might actually increase what has been growing? This is xenophobia against some groups in France.
Yes, many Muslim people are afraid about xenophobia because the real problem it's about the free of speech in France, and many French people want to fight against this attack, and they just want to fight for the freedom of the media. It's very important in France. That's a tradition and culture, but many Muslim people are afraid about Islamophobia.
Now, what exactly do people of the Muslim community think needs to be done or they need to do in order to reassure the rest of the population that they're not all terrorists?
I think for them, it's very important to debate about the terrorist attack in France and in other countries. It's a big problem, and it's not only in France. And many Muslim people want to fight against terrorism. Many Muslims would like to fight against terrorism, not Muslim people want to express that the attack is not reflect Islam.
Okay, so this does not represent most of the Muslims. Thank you very much, Ms. Konate, for joining us today. Ms. Foune Konate is an international relations scholar and advocate for social change in France. Now, the new United Nations Special Envoy in the fight against Ebola says he worries that success in treating the deadly disease may provoke a degree of complacency during his first official trip to Liberia. The head of the UN mission for Ebola emergency response, Old Sheikh Ahmed, told reporters in Monrovia that he has mixed reaction on Liberia's progress in the fight against Ebola.
Unfortunately, the reason I said it's mixed because I think we are at a stage where we are not yet there. And this is what we want also to convey through the press. There is certainly a lot to be done still in order for Liberia to be declared Ebola-free. And, it's only on this moment of optimism and some relative success that sometimes we are worried that there is any degree of complacency or people start being self-satisfied.
Well, Liberia, along with Sierra Leone and Guinea, the countries hardest hit by Ebola. The World Health Organization says Ebola has killed just over 8,200 people worldwide since the current outbreak began in West Africa. The UN agency says the deadly virus has been most prominent in Sierra Leone over the past year. While recent retaliatory moves by the Palestinians and Israel have raised questions about whether progress can be made this year in the stalled U.S.-mediated peace talks, the Palestinians launched an effort to join the International Criminal Court in order to bring war crimes charges against Israel. But that move prompted Israel to freeze a monthly tax revenue transfer to the Palestinian Authority. VOA's Pam Dawkins has more.
As Palestinians look to the ICC for support and Israel considers its next move, the U.S. says constructive engagement is the only way to move forward. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki.
Hard as it is, all sides need to find a way to work constructively and cooperatively together to lower tensions, reject violence, and find a path forward.
She says Secretary of State John Kerry has been working hard to encourage both sides to move forward. But U.S. diplomatic efforts may have come to a roadblock that will be difficult to move, says Middle East analyst Aaron David Miller.
This is so hard, and the breakthroughs have been so infrequent. And you're talking now about the crown jewels of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Jerusalem, refugees, in a very small, confined space.
He says the leadership on all sides is part of the problem.
Neither this Israeli prime minister, nor this Palestinian president, nor this American president has the will, the skill, or the capacity, or at least they have not demonstrated it yet, to do what is required and to make the decisions necessary.
Other challenges in the region, such as the rise of the Islamic State and the nuclear negotiations with Iran, may be preoccupying the Obama administration, according to Miller. But the United States does not need to rethink its overall strategy for dealing with Israel and the Palestinians, says analyst Michael Rubin.
What the United States needs to do is dig in its heels and insist that the agreements to which both parties have already agreed are going to be fulfilled.
He says a U.S.-led effort to cut international funding could force both sides to return to the bargaining table.
If money is endless, if there's never an impediment to providing aid to reconstruct after a decision has been made to go to war, then it's all the easier to make a decision to go to war.
State Department officials say Israel and the Palestinians need to make choices about what steps they're going to take. But the U.S. continues to believe that dialogue is the only way to address problems in the long term. Pam Dawkins, VOA News, the State Department.
The Obama administration ended 2014 with the release of more detainees from the U.S. military prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. On December 30th, the Pentagon announced that 3 Yemenis and 2 Tunisians were flown to Kazakhstan for resettlement. VOA correspondent Aru Pandey takes a look at whether President Obama will be able to realize his goal to close the facility during his last 2 years in office.
With the transfer of 5 detainees to the Central Asian nation of Kazakhstan, the Obama administration ended 2014 with the removal of 28 prisoners from Guantanamo last year, the largest number since 2009. When asked this week if the administration is accelerating detainee transfers, White House spokesman Josh Earnest only had this to say.
I can tell you that it continues to be an important priority of this administration to ultimately transfer all of the detainees out of Guantanamo.
Since taking office in 2009, Mr. Obama has not wavered in his promise to close the facility. During a May 2013 counterterrorism speech at National Defense University, the president called the prison a symbol around the world for an America that flouts the rule of law.
Given my administration's relentless pursuit of al-Qaeda's leadership, there is no justification beyond politics for Congress to prevent us from closing a facility that should have never been opened.
While the United States works to resettle nearly half of the 127 remaining detainees cleared for release, one of the main obstacles to emptying Guantanamo is 2010 legislation that bans the transfer of prisoners to the United States. Matthew Levitt, counterterrorism fellow with the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, says the issue of trying Guantanamo prisoners on U.S. soil has been politicized from the beginning.
I think the court system is capable. I think that our prison system is capable. I don't think it would put Americans at any more risk than we are now by virtue of having other people like them in the country, and I don't think that there is a real risk. That's my personal opinion. It has become a political football.
Ultimately, keeping Guantanamo open as the number of prisoners is whittled down may be difficult due to the cost, at nearly $3 million a year per prisoner. But Levitt says lawmakers should not make cost the rationale for closing the facility. Instead, they should shut Guantanamo because it's the right thing to do. Aru Pandey, VOA News, the White House.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, how smartphones are becoming tools for diagnosing malaria. Stay with us.
Ebola is not a curse or spiritual infection. It is a deadly disease, a fever spread by contact with the body fluids of infected people. I am Dr. Konate Greaves. Its symptoms start with a fever, fatigue, and muscle pain. Within a few days, vomiting and diarrhea sets in, and victims lose about 4 liters of body fluid each day. Ebola is highly infectious. If you experience any of these symptoms, seek medical help immediately. You must wash your hands regularly. Do not eat or handle bushmeat. Stay away from people suffering from Ebola. And do not handle the bodies of Ebola victims. If you have had contact with someone who has Ebola, you need to have your temperature monitored daily for any change. Early diagnosis and treatment is critical to your survival. Learn the facts about Ebola. Knowledge is life.
Well, doctors fighting malaria, one of the deadliest diseases on the planet, may soon have a new affordable weapon in their smartphones. Researchers have found a way to use the phone's cameras to detect the microorganisms in the patient's blood that causes the disease. VOA's George Putich reports.
According to the World Health Organization, almost 600,000 people died of malaria in 2013, making this mosquito-borne disease one of the deadliest in the world. The saddest aspect of this calamity is that it affects mostly young children. Early detection of the infection is important for successful treatment. But since the first symptoms resemble ordinary flu, a microbiologist must look at the drop of patient's blood under a microscope for a proper diagnosis. Scientists in Britain have now developed a smartphone attachment called X-Rapid that turns the phone into a 200-power microscope, while the attached app, based on facial recognition software, quickly detects the parasitic protozoa in the blood smear. Jean-Viry Babel is the CEO of Yangtze, the company that developed the app. He says it is cheap and works on the spot.
So we take a high-definition picture of a sample of blood. We separate the red blood cells from the rest, the white blood cells, the pellets, and we start looking at each of the red blood cells individually.
Viry Babel says the app is affordable, easy to use, and provides a reliability of up to 98%. The only additional equipment required is an ordinary glass lab slide called a slate.
There's only one button, which is called diagnose. So you put it on the slate, and you put it on the dry blood, you press the diagnose, and it tells you yes or no.
Researchers say the field testing of the device will begin in January and February in Tanzania, Benin, and Indonesia, while commercial use is scheduled to start by the end of March. They also plan to expand the versatility of the new device, teaching it to recognize other diseases such as tuberculosis and Lyme disease. George Putich, VOA News, Washington.
Well, malaria deaths have steadily dropped since 2000 as more people are properly diagnosed and treated. The World Health Organization says more people are also receiving mosquito nets as a preventive measure. Although progress against the mosquito-borne infection is being made, it's very fragile, and West African countries suffering now an unprecedented epidemic of Ebola are particularly at risk of seeing a resurgence of malaria. Well, for more perspective on the ongoing fight against malaria, joining us today is Dr. Chinua Akukwe. Dr. Akukwe has expertise in public health, global health, and international development partnerships. He's also a fellow of the American College of Epidemiology and a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration here in Washington. Well, Dr. Akukwe, welcome. And, you know, first we saw that very cool gadget that is coming up. What does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel wonderful. I mean, this year makes it my 30 years as a medical doctor, and to live to see that there's another tool that will help for rapid diagnosis of malaria. It's really wonderful.
Yes. Now, there's good news that actually numbers have been dropping. That is the deaths from malaria since the year 2000. How did this get achieved? I mean, it used to kill nearly 1 million people.
Yeah. I think it was a perfect opportunity and synergy of activities at the local grassroots level, at the national level, at the international level, because what many governments did around 1985, once they finished building out the primary health care system, was now begin to address the preventable causes of communicable diseases such as malaria. So you clear all the areas where water gather so that mosquito larvae no longer grows. Then you make sure that you get anybody who is sick with fever into the nearest health center, even if it's a health outpost. Then they were able to supply many facilities, even remote facilities, with the ability to diagnose whether somebody is suffering from malaria just by looking at a blood sample. Then, of course, many countries tackled counterfeit drugs, which you know was a major problem because chloroquine was one of the most counterfeited drugs. And then at the national level, virtually every government in Africa had a national plan that was aligned to the WHO plan and the United Nations plan eliminating malaria. Then at the international level, both the public, private sector and the academia came together, supplied medicines, we were able to send in experts and also help various organizations working at the rural areas to tackle malaria. So it was a perfect synergy of opportunity and action.
How did the academics and also governments tackle also the issue of some of those drugs that were becoming overused to the extent that people are developing some resistance to them?
Yes. I think there were two parts. One was to end the problem of counterfeit drugs. And I think even from WHO studies that has probably up to 95% in some of the most affected countries like Nigeria. Then the second part was training health people on proper diagnosis and treatment. And then the third part was preventive messages to the ordinary people in terms of what you need to do if you are sick and how you should go to the nearest medical facility and make sure that you receive treatment. And when you are treated, you adhere to whatever the doctor says that you should be doing. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, the final part was some of the drugs that came after chloroquine were able, 1 dose or 2 doses or 3 doses. So it was much easier for the average person.
7 day
7 days or the Sunday medicine and so on.
Now, very quickly, there are fears that some of these gains could be reversed. So what is happening? What is threatening and what must be done?
I think the threat came from the issue of emphasis on vertical programs like HIV, AIDS, and some of us may have indirectly contributed because when Africa was facing the major problem of HIV, AIDS, there was need to address that. And what happened in many, many countries, especially the poorer African countries, that facilities, services, and personnel were shifted to HIV AIDS. So the same thing with what's going on in Ebola. Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea are at a very grave risk of resurgence of malaria because virtually every health entity in these 3 countries are devoted to tackling Ebola. And the second thing was, of course, after the 2008 global financial crisis, all the international organizations reduced the kind of support, both technical and financial, and logistics for communicable diseases. And
so how can governments achieve the goal of having capacity in all those areas, malaria and all the other diseases without hurting any sector?
I think the idea is for each country in Africa to adhere to its National Development Health Plan, where they had series of resource allocation for specific diseases. And even when you are dealing with an emergency, make sure that whether it's financial or logistics, that you use it to address malaria. For instance, in West Africa, I expect every West African country to put in a lot of resources to addressing malaria and TB, because these are all endemic in that region.
So things don't stop happening because
there's Ebola. It should not stop happening because there's Ebola.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Akukwe, for joining us today. While Dr. Chinua Akukwe is an expert in public health, global health, and international development partnerships. We thank you for joining us, and it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the director of a new Martin Luther King biopic makes history. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In France, military reinforcements boost Paris's security following the deadly terrorist attack on satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo on Wednesday. In Burundi, an army spokesman says that 95 rebels had been killed following a recent cross-border attack from the DRC. And the United Nations says that wars in the Middle East, Africa, and elsewhere uprooted an unprecedented 5.5 million people in the first 6 months of 2014. Finally, in Ethiopia, Coptic Christians celebrate Orthodox Christmas in the capital city, Addis Ababa. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here is what's trending. The director of the new Martin Luther King Jr. biopic makes history. Selma director Ava DuVernay made history as the first African-American woman to be nominated for Best Director in the 72 years of the Golden Globes. If she wins, she would be the first black man or woman to win a Best Movie Director Globe. DuVernay, who's a former Hollywood publicist, has also been praised for deftly handling a large supporting cast that includes veterans like Oprah Winfrey, who's also a producer of that film. Well, next up, in Monaco, the continuation of the Grimaldi line is assured. A large crowd stand out in Monaco to greet the royal family's month-old babies, twins, Gabriela and Jacques, who made their first appearance on the royal palace's balcony. Their parents, Prince Albert II and Princess Charlene of Monaco, presented the newborns to flag-waving onlookers. Both royals stood on the balcony, each holding a baby swaddled in white. According to Monaco's rules, as a boy, Jacques takes precedence over his sister in the succession to the centuries-old Grimaldi dynasty, although she is older by 2 minutes. And finally, smart clothes, socks and cuffs take fashion high-tech at the International Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Well, it's not billed as a smart watch, rather a fashion accessory paired with the latest technology. Recording artist will.i.am is bringing his own Pulse wearable device to the tech party. The entertainer and entrepreneur claims his new gadget boasts all the abilities of a smartphone, but strapped to your wrist. It allows users to make calls, send messages, listen to music, and more. Wearable technology is one of the biggest trends at this year's event, with new gadgets finding their way into materials in the form of vests, jackets, and dresses. And that is what is trending today.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words, where we teach you about words in the news.
This word is one you hear in many stories about politicians. It has to do with trust.
The president's credibility has suffered serious damage, says analyst Stu Rothenberg. He says that will have an impact on Democratic candidates in next year's midterm elections.
Credibility. It means you can believe and trust what a person says. It is a good quality to have. So when politicians lose credibility, their popularity goes down too.
Now, when you hear the word credibility, you will know what this news word means.